Welcome to Build. I'm your host, Ricky Camilleri. Our next guest recently won the Academy Award for Best Foreign Film and is somehow back with another great work. Sebastian Lelio directs Rachel McAdams, Rachel Weisz, and Alessandro Nivola in Disobedience, the story of a woman who returns to her Orthodox Jewish past and disrupts the rigid lies of those still living there. Let's take a look.
Ronit, we weren't expecting you.
Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot. My father just died.
So you came to on the road?
Why else would I be here? Hello, Esty.
Your wife? She won't be distracted by Ronit's return?
We all have forgiven you, Ronnie.
What for, Emma?
For everything. We never thought we'd see you again.
Sorry to disappoint you.
And you're not married.
It's important that this week is conducted with honor. It's the most important thing.
Honor. It's insane that you're here.
This is my house we're talking about. I keep it in order.
Why did you get married?
I think he felt that marriage would cure me. Ronit? Is that you?
Esty, what's happened? Tell me the truth.
We need to stop this.
I think you should leave him.
I'd do anything for you. Do you know that?
Look at me! I have always been this way! I want you to give me my freedom.
I want to take your picture.
Everybody, please welcome Alessandro Nivola and Sebastian Lelio. Hey, guys.
Hi.
Thanks for being here. Congratulations on the film. I love so much about this film. I wonder if there's any way we can talk about it as if everybody in the audience has already seen it, because there are so many things that I want to talk about it, that I want to say about it. First and foremost, though, you just won Best Foreign Film for A Fantastic Woman. When did this film come into the picture? When did you start making this in relation to that? And, did you finish one and then just jump into the other?
Yes. I wrote A Fantastic Woman and then Disobedience. It was a co-writing process with Rebecca Lenkiewicz. And so I wrote them back to back. And then...
How did you get involved with this film? Like, what drew you to this? Obviously, it's not your world or anything that I think you would necessarily have been a part of or have a history with, right?
It was a time after my previous film, Gloria, where I had for the first time offers to film in English. And I was like reading a lot of stuff and didn't really connect with anything until the producer, Frida Torres Blanco, met me and met with me and told me the basic idea. And I loved it. It sounded great. And the invitation to write and direct felt really good, because it was about the whole arc of creating and thinking and, bringing a film to life. So I just really loved the dynamics between the characters and this idea of these very vibrant human beings trying to do their best, confused and trying to grow, but operating against a backdrop of pretty much fixed ideas or you know, very strong conceptions about the world. So that tension between people that are in flux and a backdrop that is about eternal truth seemed very, well, familiar on one side, maybe because I'm from Chile, and totally alien to me because I am not British and I am not Jewish.
One of the things that I loved about that backdrop and the way that you used it is that in so many ways you just kept it as kind of a backdrop, and it never felt like this. It never felt it never seemed like you were judgmental of that backdrop in a way by making it more oppressive or even more painful for the characters. It's kind of just there and it's affecting them and it's part of their decisions and it bleeds into their decisions, of course, but there's never a dark fear about the oppression of that community, which I thought was in many ways respectful while at the same time remaining kind of objective about what it would feel like to have these feelings while living in that community.
Yeah, well, I think that any human society has its lights and shadows, but I think one of the things that we discovered during the making of the film and probably during the writing process was that the main antagonist force was within the three of them, within themselves. So they were their own main obstacle, you know. So it wasn't the community. Of course, the community had a role, but it was really about themselves trying to overcome their own dilemmas. And I found that really interesting to explore, because making the community the bad ones, it seemed too easy.
Yeah, it's cliche for one. And one of the things that I love about this film, and I was kind of saying in the green room, is that it avoids the cliche all the way through. And I think especially when that comes to your character and his evolution and his arc in the last act of the film, it really avoids the trappings of, I think, what most movies would do with your kind of character. Is that what sort of attracted you to being a part of this film?
Well, a lot of different things attracted me to the film. I think the first was just the idea of playing somebody that was as different from myself as this character was obviously bound to be. You know, somebody, anytime you have an opportunity to explore somebody from a very particular and specific, you know, cultural milieu or you know, with a very specific set of physical, behavioral things, or you know, that you have to kind of transform yourself in a way that is going to be, you know, complete and convincing, is always like a, you know, the kind of challenge that I have really sought out.
That said, do you also try to make that person as much like yourself as possible to get yourself there, or find out what's in that person that is very similar to you?
Well, yes and no. I mean, I think I became an actor to begin with, which may be true of a lot of different actors, as a way of kind of escaping my own life and escaping my own skin. You know, I've always felt a little bit sort of self-conscious socially, and when I was playing characters that were very different from myself, I always felt free. And so that was initially, you know, when I was younger, I was just trying to, you know, get as far away from myself as I could. And so I didn't tend to look to my own life to find the parallels with the characters. As time has gone on, I think there's been a change where I still really enjoy something like this, where I feel like I'm in disguise, because I still feel that freedom that comes with that. But I do definitely feel that much more than before, I'm looking to my own life emotionally to try and understand how a character's feeling. But just to go back to what your original question was, I mean, that was one part of what was exciting to me. The other was I'd seen his film Gloria, and I really loved it. And a big change that I made in my career a few years back was that I used to choose the jobs I did exclusively just on the character, on the role, and how good or interesting the role was. And a number of years ago, I just decided that I only wanted to work with great directors because I'd been in a lot of movies where I was better than the movie. And it really is soul destroying, that feeling. And so I started doing any role in a movie with a great director. And this was a situation where I was lucky enough to have both.
Can I ask a question sort of based off of that? And this is Sebastian excluded from this question. But how often have you found, though, that you're with a great director, but the movie doesn't come out as great as that director was, or you're with what feels like a bad director on set and the movie comes out much better than what you felt like was happening on set? Or is that a rarity?
Yeah, I mean, when you're with a bad director, it almost never turns out well. When you're with a great director, it occasionally turns out well. Making movies is really, really hard, and it's a really collaborative thing. And so many things have to go right for the movie to be good. But the director definitely has to be good to stand a chance. That's in my experience, at least. And certainly since I started just seeking. There was a period where I actually kind of stepped back and started doing smaller roles in movies with better directors. I mean, American Hustle and Selma and Most Violent Year. It was like a transition moment for me where I was like, you know what, I'm sick of making these movies that are just don't have a visionary.
But you had some great movies prior to that with visionary directors as well.
Yeah, I mean, but. If you look at, I actually tallied through my IMDb page last year at one point because I had a bet with somebody about it, and I counted 12 movies that I'd been in that never got released, and that starts to piss you off.
What makes obviously the films come out beautifully, but what makes him on set? What makes Sebastian a great director?
Well, the thing that you really want is a balance of things. On the one hand, you want somebody who is, very confident and has a strong idea of, for each scene, how they see it in their head, how they hear it, and, how they imagine your character and how they imagine the other characters and all the relationships, and that they've really thought about those things and that they have a strong opinion about it. And on the other hand, you want that same person to be just completely open-minded to all of the input that's coming in through all of the people that he's hired to work on the film with, both from the actors and the, designers. And it's really hard to find somebody that can have both those things, because either you get somebody who's really pig-headed, who has a really who has a strong vision, but just can't hear it from anybody else.
Protective and nervous about their ego, yeah.
Yeah, or they're really wishy-washy and kind of timid and frightened and are sort of, you don't want to be, asked what your opinion is because you feel like they don't have one of their own. And so, Sebastian is one of those, rare directors that has both those things. He's a I'm going to talk about.
You don't have to lie.
He's very.
You can be honest.
I knew upon asking this question it might make someone uncomfortable.
Well, I'm going to embarrass him just by saying that he has a very quiet confidence. He's very calm and soft-spoken, and very sensitive to actors too, which is it's a difficult thing to know how to talk to actors in scenes and to get the best out of them. And he has a way of making you feel like he's excited to be watching you, and that's really the most that you could ask for.
This film, I feel like the style of this film is a little bit different than maybe what at least English-speaking audiences are. I don't want to say used to with you, but have gotten to know you with in terms of Gloria and A Fantastic Woman. Slightly, I think, larger than lifestyles at times, or at least personalities within those films. Was there a part of you that wanted to do something that felt a lot different than what people had sort of known you for? And maybe you don't feel that way at all with this.
No, I wasn't thinking in those terms because I was really excited about exploring that unknown world. And I loved the almost mythic or mythical element that the story has. Because if you think about it, you could think about it as a story of a princess that comes back from exile after the king has died, you know, and so the throne is empty, and in those days, you know, the world can be turned upside down. So that was my way of accessing this, and through that process, I started to learn about the culture and trying to get the cultural nuances right and the texture right. But strangely enough, it felt, as I said, very far away from me, but very familiar. Because, you know, my first film is called The Sacred Family, and it has some elements in common. You know, an oppressive environment, or very strict, and people trying to, well, willing to disobey in order to become who they are, and also willing to pay the price that implies. So I didn't feel far away in terms of the subject, and then in terms of style, I thought that it could have been interesting to see them, you know, in a register that where you're watching, you feel that you're watching people and not characters. That they feel so close to you, so real, that you can really relate to that world. And that, of course, is all artifice.
Yeah.
You know, you have to create that. But I love to do that as well.
But I think what works so well about that approach is when the film reveals itself to be a three-hander, essentially, in terms of arcs. You don't see that. I personally did not see that coming at all, you know. Again, I hate to reference, like, you know, what a lesser film would do or something, but you would see right from the beginning what the clear arcs were for each character, and you would watch them build. There's something about a turning point in this movie where you realize it's not just your main character who's going to have a sort of seismic shift in the way that they grow and change after this movie ends. It's everybody that these three people that we've been watching. No spoilers, sorry. Was that something that was in the, were you rewriting a script that was originally given to you? Was that something that you knew from the beginning you were gonna do with the characters?
Well, it all came from Naomi Alderman's novel.
Oh, excuse me, yeah.
So that was the only text, and then it was the first time I was doing an adaptation, and I decided to create this kind of like Baroque structure where you have three narrative lines that sometimes they go separately, and sometimes they mingle, and then they go alone again by themselves, and I really love that. It's like listening to Bach, assuming that this is far away from that, because Bach is like the Pope, but
he really is.
He
really is.
There's
isn't
nothing
he?
beyond that.
Yeah. Sometimes when you put Bach on, you just like, if you put Bach on, you just go, oh fuck.
Yeah.
Like the greatest. Nothing's ever been better than this. What are we doing?
Let's retire and yeah, I know. But there is something about that structure that is at the same time very simple, but can allow great complexity, because you are making things resonate by combining them, you know, by putting them together or apart. So you can play a lot with it, and I really liked this idea of of a film which structure reveals progressively, and you really don't know where things are going to go to, which direction they will take, and it's all about playing with the spectators' expectations, and then prepare them for something and give them something else.
And that also has a lot to do with how you work with your actors as well. Oftentimes performances will kind of channel or at least signal to what the arc is going to be or what's going to happen later in the movie. When you're working with a director who wants to keep everything in the moment so it remains a escalating surprise, if you will, do you have those conversations? Or would directors every now and then be like, keep this in mind because, you know, later in the movie your character is going to do this, so we have to see a twinkle of that in your eye right now?
Yeah, I mean, look, we one of the most enjoyable parts of the whole process was in the months leading up to the shooting of the movie, and I was fortunate enough to have a longer than usual lead time before we started filming, in order to, you know, give me time to really research this character that was a stretch, and also to grow a really big beard. But we started out Skyping together for I remember kind of long times. We would have like hour-long Skype sessions and stuff, and we would just talk and talk and talk about the character and about what his experience might have been, and what these you know, little details about the relationships and everything. So it wasn't just completely, I mean, of course, that doesn't preclude spontaneity on the set. I just meant that there was, we did talk a lot about it. I think one of the things that really helped the surprise that you're describing, you know, and to avoid some of the cliches, was something that was easy to perform just because it existed already in the script, which was that this character, ironically, is the person who's most welcoming of Rachel's character into the sort of breast of his family. You know, and she, of course, proves to be the person that is slowly unraveling his entire life. And for the longest time in the movie, he's the one who keeps telling everybody else in the community, no, 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 we have to allow her in. We have to allow her in. She has to come closer, 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 closer. And all the while, like,
Very close.
you know, it's just like starting to be the, you know, source of his marriage unraveling. So that right there is a really, you know, it's a surprise and something that's great to play, because a character who's doing something that is actually, first of all, really magnanimous and you know, something that a good person does, but is also like sowing the seeds for his own destruction somehow is
But is also in a lot of ways
story.
in opposition to the sort of mainstream of his community, or what the sort of mainstream voices of his community are telling him. That in a lot of ways does kind of channel, for lack of a better word, you know, how he can kind of come around at some point.
Yeah, well, I just love the idea that there was, you know, that this was a character who, within the confines of, you know, religious law that he had willingly chosen to follow and was, you know, had grown up in, was actually a fairly open-minded person, a fairly liberal-minded person. He, you know, was willing to, despite the fact that he probably knew that these two had had some kind of romantic relationship in the past, he was still willing to invite her in, you know, just because he's not, you know, he's not a judgmental person. He's not a closed-minded person, but as is true with like most liberal people, when it gets personal, you know, when it's like really you and your life and your family and your wife that, you know, is being seduced by someone else or whatever, it's easy to be full of forgiveness for someone when it's, you know, theoretical, you know, philosophically, and when it's like actually you, that becomes a much harder thing to accept. And so this man who's like, generally very willing to, forgive people all kinds of behavior, I imagine, and think the best of people and hope for the best, is suddenly like confronted with a situation where he has no choice but to like confront all of this rage and jealousy and fear and panic that is evoked from that kind of jeopardy that he's put in. And that's a great thing for a character to be put in, somebody who's a good man, who's like forced to, confront like feelings of his darker instincts,
Let's get some questions from our audience. Who has a question? Hey.
Hi, my name is Jay Daniels. I go by they, them. I'm an artist and filmmaker. I actually grew up in a community that's similar like this. So I could tell you first that all the queer ex-Hasidic women that I know are talking about this film. So you reach to their core. So I got
a huge audience out there.
They even have like events on Facebook to like go as groups. So
Is that true?
yeah.
Oh, that's so
yeah,
great.
Jewish queer youth and like a bunch of other OTD, that's the term, off the derech groups. So you hit your core. So I actually got a grant from New York Public Library. I've been working on a play for 2 years called L'chaim to Dykes. And it's about 5 ex-Hasidic women who are all queer, who have to live these dual lives. And I had a writer's block for a half a year because I felt not only pressure to represent these women right, and like I at least know the community, and I could understand, but you were talking about relation and how, we want people to relate to them not as characters. It's funny, sometimes I was been told by professors, I'm too attached to them and I need to see them as characters, but I would just love to hear from you advice in terms of what could I do just in the future in this to like bring underrepresented characters, which you did so perfectly well with Fantastic Woman. I loved it.
Thank you.
And just make the audience really relate and see them as people.
Thank you. I want to join one of those Facebook group. Well, the thing is that I love actors. I love working with them, but and I need characters, and I love to write them and to create them and to really take care of them. But then at a certain point, I'm more interested in the artist, the person that is interpreting them. So I'm trying to grasp something with the camera that, of course, has to do with the character, but it's mainly about the person that is interpreting them. So I guess that's my angle of approach. So that's why we had long conversations, and it's all about building trust, because for me, script is always map. It's never territory. The territory is always the shooting. That's where things really happen, even though you need to write like crazy in order to later allow yourself the freedom to get lost, because you can afford that, because you know so much about the dynamics of the story and the characters that you can really have that luxury, and I think within the limits of common sense during the shooting, we all knew, I hope that you guys did, that the actors could, explore and get lost and try things, and nothing was written on stone, and that they could be, daring or foolish, and I would take care of them later on in the editing. So I guess that's at least my secret, I'm very interested in the people that are doing as if, you know what I mean? So so that's why I have to get to know Alessandro or the two Rachels enough in order for a certain level of trust, real trust, to be there. So you can operate in that territory where where something really human is happening, and that thing that is happening, of course, has to do with the character, but for me, is coming from a deeper place, which is, you know, the human being that is really giving that artistic battle in front of the camera.
Do you find that your scripts change at all after sort of long Skype sessions with the actors? Do you go back and end up sort of rewriting it all based off of the conversations that you've had?
Yeah, I mean, I keep rewriting even
You're rewriting on the day a lot of the time too?
the night before. And sometimes when something, because, you know, you write and things look great, and then you get to the set or the place where you're shooting, and for unknown mysterious reasons, somehow it doesn't work. Maybe it's the size of the place, or it's the, I don't know, the texture of the furniture or whatever. If something's not working, you have to react, you know? And it's like when you listen to music and you hear something untuned, and it's like, that is not working. Yeah. It sounds bad. It's the same, you know, and
crazy in touch with your instincts and trust them to be able to do that too.
Yeah, and very welcoming to listen to the actors' instincts and to, you know, come out with a solution together. You know, why is this happening? Why is this? You know, why does this feel kind of like untuned? You say that?
Yeah, that's sure. That works. Yeah.
And then you have a little conversation and someone comes with an idea and you try it. It might work, it might not. But then, you know,
another idea comes.
Exactly.
Pushing forward,
and suddenly it clicks.
How often do you find that you're on set with directors who can hear that piece that's out of tune and have the confidence to sort of work with the actors to reshape the scene or the dialogue or whatever's happening that needs to be kind of brought back into tune?
Well, more and more, as I've sought out directors who, you know, most of them have already made several great movies or one great movie or something, so the likelihood has been better that they would. I mean, I think a big part of it is a sense of rhythm, that every scene has a rhythm, and every film has a rhythm, and there's a, you know, and rhythms in storytelling, you know, can ebb and flow, and just to have, you know, really good directors have an innate sense of where the movie needs to like drive a little harder, and then where it needs to like have a kind of, you know, gentle sway, and then where it needs to, you know, have something like jagged that jolts you out of your complacency, and then another place where it needs to just be gentle with you, and that's all rhythm, really. And some of that is discovered in the editing room. I mean, I'm producing movies now too, and it's made me more aware of that than ever, that you get into the editing room and you know, the rhythm of a scene or the rhythm of the film can be different than the one that you thought it was going to be. But the best directors definitely have a feel for that. And I think part of what he's describing on the set, when something's not working, it's often that like the rhythm feels off. And so it's trying to find that, trying to like find the rhythm of the scene so that like the playing of it suddenly feels easy and natural.
Next question.
Hi. So since A Fantastic Woman was a huge landmark for the LGBTQ community in cinema, what do you expect this film, which is also another representation of that, to your audience? What do you want the message to resonate with your audience?
Well, it's hard for me to talk in terms of messages, because I believe film should be an experience, you know, more than a message. And then I'm particularly obsessed with trying to create, so to say, like a channel between the film and the spectator that is emotional in the first place, because I believe that if that channel is is carefully created or built. Through it, all kinds of, let's say, messages or ideas can travel through that channel and can really grow within the spectator, but in a very strong way, because it's not intellectual in the first place. It's emotional, and that doesn't mean that the film is not dealing with intellectual ideas or philosophical conceptions or complex definitions. But I do believe if you manage to touch the spectator and to make him so to say, to hypnotize him or them, and then make them, so to say, vulnerable or open enough to receive the film, then everything, every idea, every concept can really grow within the spectator. So I hope that happens again with this film. Let's see.
What is it like, this is kind of silly, but Fantastic Woman is still playing in some theaters around New York right now. You're probably going to have two movies playing in theaters at the same time. What does that feel like?
The posters at the Angelica of the two movies are
really?
right next to each other.
That's
on
so
the
cool.
wall.
Seen that, yeah. I was like, wow. I don't know. It's an error in the matrix.
It's a glitch,
an anomaly.
a glitch in the Matrix. Yeah, the cat.
Something happened. It's great. It's great. It's really exciting.
Congratulations.
Thank
It's really
you.
great.
Thank you.
I think we have time for one more, right?
Hi. I had a question about tone. The film looks terrific, but a lesser version of this film could turn into Oscar bait and seem like the fake trailer at the beginning of Tropic Thunder with the gay monks. And I wanted to know how both of you kept the tone on set.
It's a brilliant movie.
But yeah, the film looks terrific, but how do you keep a film like this from turning into a lesser version of this movie? How do you do the tone right?
Well, tone is everything. Tone is the thing, because it implies everything else. To get the tone right, you have to get the rhythm right, you have to get the writing right, you have to everything. So to say, leads towards tone. So it's a hard question to answer, because maybe the answer is by taking care of everything, and then to be very receptive during the shooting to whatever feels wrong in terms of tone. It's hard to explain, I would say, but it's very instinctive.
I honestly think it's with something like this, it's having a very great sense of what is and what isn't cliche, because the pitfalls of a movie like this are, and what you're describing, I think, are just what are cliches and falling into that. Roger Ebert said that it's not what a movie is about, it's how it's about it. And that's kind of exactly what is so great about something like Disobedience.
You just never go full retard.
You want to end this there? But I mean, that seems to be like when you're doing a movie about a sort of forbidden love affair in an oppressive, for lack of a better word, under an oppressive community. One of the things that you go is like, how do we do the things that everything else? How do we not do the things that everybody else has already done, right?
Yeah, of course. And then you have to know how to use cliché as well. Yeah. You know what I mean? Because
it's like setting up, but then not.
Yeah, because you think that the film is going to go that way, and then boom, it turns towards a different direction. Because we are trained culturally to expect some things from films, and then it's interesting to be aware of that, because you can defeat expectations.
You still get the satisfaction of a punchline without it being obvious.
Yeah.
One thing is that Sebastian I think, always avoids Oscar moments, you know, in performance. Like, we were always avoiding those moments that would, you know, allow something to land so comfortably and so dramatically that it would feel like the kinds of moments that you're describing, you know, where the character finally, you know, gets up in the synagogue and he just tells it like, you know, I mean, there's
you
always
have a
something
moment.
to sort of undercut that, it felt like, in the way that he went about directing it, whether it was sort of just in the sort of moment where it would just crest over to that, you know, complete satisfaction. It's almost like just denying complete satisfaction. Does that make sense? Like,
Yeah.
But at the same time, it is a very satisfying film in terms of how it wraps up. And you have what on the page, or what other actors and directors would do, a very Oscar baity scene that is not ended
absolutely.
up making. But it's not.
You couldn't be more right.
But you don't direct or end up directing or acting it that way.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, the way that we sort of talked about that scene was always, I guess, just that he, on the one hand, didn't, you know, in certain moments didn't want it to get. It's avoiding melodrama, really. I guess is what it is. Is just avoiding things getting too sort of histrionic, and just to kind of keep finding the reality. The reality is, is never really. Never really has that sort of tidiness of those kinds of movies. It's always, a bit awkward, or, uncomfortable, or, the rhythms are, again, like a little bit slightly off or something. And that's what, as long as you're trying to approximate the reality, it tends to avoid those kinds of movies.
Histrionic. Sorry. Go ahead.
I guess that, real emotion in a film should never come from a cliché. It always comes from a place that is unexpected, and you're suddenly touched, or you're crying, or you're deeply moved by reasons that you don't understand, yet. Maybe later on you can analyze it, but it has to be like a surprise attack, and that's all created. It's like an architectural plan, But I guess, again, talking about cliches and how to avoid them it's about playing with them and then doing something else, and that touches all aspects of filmmaking, camera, performance, but then it's all about creating a reaction in the spectator that is somehow unknown to them. Or
you also cut out some things that, could have maybe felt that, like the kinds of moments that you're describing. I mean, there was a whole sequence where when I go into, I mean, if you haven't seen the movie, you don't know what I'm talking about. But there was a sequence where I go into my office and I get drunk, and in the movie now, I have a drink and I'm really suffering, obviously. And then I go back and we have this sort of awkward dinner with the three of us, and the way that originally it went in the script and the way that we had shot it was I got really drunk and, have like this whole kind of Oscar moment in my office where, I'm sort of praying and sort of hallucinating and then going home sort of, drunkenly and stopping and pissing up against the side of the wall, and then coming home and is the scene with the girls is, more angry, and then, and then there was another big scene before the synagogue, sort of shortly before the synagogue, where, I just sort of unload on Rachel Weisz in this very, heavily dramatic way. And I mean, there were all kinds of things that could have pushed this movie. And, and on the day, you never really know how it's going to play until you cut it together. And obviously he did, and you felt that those things were going to, potentially push it into that kind of territory. And so, he made, consciously made decisions to not go that route. So.
It's one of those things that when you're scripting it, you're kind of like, does this, I don't know if my movie needs to go this far, or this seems important to the story on the page, but then you get into the editing bay and you're like, oh, we've said this already, or this is implied, implicit for the audience.
No way to know which thing's gonna be what.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, maybe that scene that you are describing could have been somehow, could have ended up being in the film, but it didn't, for many reasons. You know, it's not about the scene being badly directed or performed, but it's about the general balance that you have to create at the end. Because if you want to have a really active spectator, then you have to build a real tension between the amount of information that is given and that is held back.
Guys, congratulations on the film. It's wonderful. It's in theaters this Friday, right? This Friday.
Yeah, and we're doing Q&As. Rachel Weisz and I are going to do Q&As after the 6 o'clock and the 7 o'clock performances at the Angelica.
Oh, fantastic.
So if you want to hear that, come see those shows there.
Everybody give a round of applause for Sebastian
Thank you.
Alessandro.
Thanks.